Hi, listeners, and welcome to No Priors. Today, we are talking to a very good human software engineer and the co-founder and CEO of Cognition, Scott Wu. The team at Cognition calls themselves an AI lab focused on reasoning. And recently, they released a demo of Devin, an AI software engineer that can increasingly handle entire tasks end-to-end, with leading results on Sweetbench, a software engineering benchmark of real-world GitHub issues. The demo broke the internet, at least among tech Twitter, and so we're really excited to have Scott. Welcome, Scott.
Hey. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you have been coding and then coding competitively since you were a kid. What first got you interested?
I always really liked math growing up, actually. My older brother, Neil, was the first to get me into programming. So I think I learned how to program when I was around 9 years old. I just fell in love with it. I think the ability to take ideas and then make them into reality was always really exciting for me. I did a lot of math and programming competitions, throughout school. And by the time I finished high school, I was pretty set on going into tech. So,
can you explain for our listeners who may, some set of our listeners that are not familiar, like what IOI is?
Yeah, sure. So IOI is the International Olympiad of Informatics. So it's the Olympiad of code, basically, and it works just like the other Olympics. Every country sends in their own team of their best coders, and it's a competitive programming competition. And there's gold medals, silver medals, bronze medals, and so on. And the whole idea is it's very algorithmic problem solving, and so you're given tasks to solve, and you have to figure out the optimal algorithms for those, and then also implement those into code.
It's like a interesting topic for somebody who was world class at IOI. Like, what is practice like for getting better at competitive programming?
Yeah, I used to, programming and math competitions used to be my entire life when I was growing up. It's what you think about in the shower. It's what you're spending all your time on. It's, how every problem in life that I would run into, I would frame as an algorithms problem, basically. And a lot of it is like a lot of other disciplines, it's just, putting a lot of effort into it and being willing to think really analytically and, be very brutal about your own shortcomings and, focus on the things that you're not doing well and just continue to push and improve.
Is it like a known space of like domains and algorithms one can learn, or is it really like learning to solve problems algorithmically really well? And it could be completely new problems or domains in every competition?
Yeah, there's definitely there definitely are standard algorithms that exist. So like, shortest path or something, or, binary search trees or things like that. And so it helps a lot to learn the fundamentals. But the whole idea is that every problem in a contest is totally unique. It's a new problem that's never appeared before. And the beauty of the contest itself is in the creative problem solving that you're doing to figure out the right algorithm, right? And so, while the fundamentals are very helpful, a lot of it is figuring out how to use each of these pieces and, reduce the problem to a shortest path problem, or how you, modify, certain algorithms to make them work for different use cases.
Yeah, I feel like there's a whole generation of people now who are basically people who grew up with the internet being their hometown in some sense. Where a lot of their early community or people they interact with are sort of come from that world. And I feel like that's a lot of people in the AI world today. Was that true for the IOI community as well? Was it largely like online interactions and trading tips with strangers who became friends and all that kind of stuff? And then if so, how's that impacted your career or your life or, working with others over time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and so there were not a lot of other people who had the same kind of interest in math and programming that I did. And so, a lot of these competitions were the first time that I got to meet others who had a lot of these same interests. And the competitions are once a year, and maybe there's training camps or things like that are a couple times a year. But for the large majority of the year, we'd be talking online, and we had all of our own communities where we'd talk about competition problems, but also kind of we became very close friends through that too.
Yeah, it's an incredibly smart community of people, at least, competing at the highest level. And I think you said before that CP has more in common with entrepreneurship than one might see from the outside initially, because it looks so like structured as a competition. But one of the reasons we met was You knew very well somebody from high school that I had backed previously. And I found out recently that I think you knew like Alex Wang in middle school too. And I was like, oh, that's a small world.
Yeah. No, it was a very, very tight knit group. Honestly, a lot of that group, many of them became founders, and a lot of them went into AI. And so, no, it's cool to see. I think I think there's overlaps for sure. I think they're the more subtle kind of overlaps, obviously, where it's, you're not literally using shortest path or something to build your company, but a lot of the same constructs and a lot of the same principles are there. And I think one of the really big things that I think about all the time is, a lot of the really great math or programming problems are kind of about, what are all these assumptions that you take for granted, and which one of those might actually not be true. And a lot of these really tough problems and really interesting problems are about finding this creative idea that's actually something that's, you would not intuitively think of at all at first, right? And I think startups are much the same way. I think a lot of building a great startup is about, finding something that the world doesn't believe is true yet, but actually is, and kind of learning how to think independently, how to come at problems from a very first principles mindset. And of course, as with any discipline, how to just really push yourself to grow and continue to improve over time. I think there's a lot of commonalities.
It seems like a lot of what you mentioned really impacted what you ended up doing at Cognition and working on Devin, because when you launched it, a lot of people saw behavior that could exist today that they didn't think could exist. And a lot of people were waiting for the next sort of step up in an LLM or foundation model to get there. Could you tell us a little bit more about Cognition and what Devin is and how it works and how you think about it in the context of rethinking what's possible today?
Yeah, so Cognition got started around November, and the initial group, a lot of them actually were, many of my friends from this math and programming contest community, we had all done all of those, but since then we've all actually had our own kind of journeys in AI, and so I started a machine learning company called Lunch Club that I ran for about 5 years. Others on the team, my co-founder Walden, built a lot of early Cursor, for example, and my other co-founder Steven was one of the first engineers at Scale AI. And our whole founding team was kind of like that. We had grown up with a love of math and programming and problem solving, but we'd also spent our last 5 or 10 years at these different AI and AI infra companies. For one, I think code has a very special place in our hearts, but I think for two, I do think there's a lot that can be done with code. I would even say like most of the progress in the world in the last 20 or 30 years has come from software. And it's crazy when you think about how actually everyone everywhere needs more software engineering, not less, right? I mean, every company is hiring for more software engineers. Everyone has more ideas than time to build them. We really felt like there was a lot to do with accelerating the pace of code.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, can you describe like what Devin does today?
Sure. Yeah. So Devin is an AI software engineer. What I mean by that is that Devin is fully able to make all of its own decisions in the same way that a human software engineer would. And so, obviously writing and editing code is a huge piece of that, but also, being able to work with the command line, being able to use the browser, being able to read documentation, being able to deploy or test or debug or all these pieces, Devin does autonomously. And so, you can give Devin a simple prompt of what you'd like to build, and Devin will just go through and do that whole end to end. And you can interact with Devin as well. You can see what Devin's looking at or what Devin's working on and give feedback on that too. And so it's very much meant to mirror the experience of, looking over the shoulder of another engineer to be able to see what they're doing and guide them or give feedback.
What has been the reaction to Devin and Cognition online in the popular discourse, and how do you think people are interpreting the product that you launched?
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun to see all the reactions to Devin. We got a lot more views than we expected. It was honestly quite something to see some of my middle school math videos back on Twitter all over again. But yeah, no, I mean, it's great to see the reaction. And as with anything, I mean, there's obviously the healthy mix of, there are some who are skeptics who are saying, oh, there's no way this could possibly work. And there are some who are saying, wow, we're all going to lose all of our jobs.
Why do you think like engineering doesn't disappear as a class of work in the future?
We're obviously very excited about Devin, but I think if anything, there's going to be more engineers, not less. And I'll kind of give two reasons why. I think the first is there's just so much demand for engineering out there, and so much demand, honestly, even in ways that we don't always think about, right? A lot of using Excel or a lot of working with various tools is in some ways is there because engineering is hard, right? I think there are so many problems that could be solved with code, and there's so much more that could be built with code that I think multiplying every single developer is going to give us more developers, not less. The other thing I think is that Devin is very much not the type to decide what to do, and I think there is always this core problem of how you decide what exactly to build or what problem to solve, or how particular things should work. Rather than engineering going away, I think engineering actually becomes a more pure abstraction of those things, right? I think the average software engineers today might spend 20% of their time thinking through all these really fundamental problem-solving questions, and 80% of the time writing that in code. And I think they'll be able to do 5x more, and they'll be able to spend all their time doing this really creative problem solving. And that's what we're really excited about.
As a really loose analogy, I think of human calculators previously, right? You probably don't want people doing that work, and it allows you to expand to much more capable human beings that would have done that work. And one of my core optimisms around AI is that it is actually very democratizing, right? We are tapping into latent demand for lots of different activities where it was just unaffordable before, where the software doesn't match the workflows that people want, or it's not at sufficient quality, or it's not as sophisticated as could be for an unlimited number of things. So I'm very excited about that, actually.
Yeah, definitely. That's largely the case, I think, in knowledge work everywhere, even, right? Where, there's so much to do, and there's so many problems out there to solve. And I think enabling every human to do more is only going to help us all accelerate faster.
I think this is one of the really interesting things about the product was, I feel like there are more companies showing up now, kind of showing me Devin-like UIs. And before, a lot of people built agents, and you'd start the agent and it would go off, and then 30 minutes later, it would come back with something that you didn't like. And in the case of Devin, because it feels like a lot of agents today are almost really eager interns, right? There's an intent to build what you wanted to, but then sometimes it goes off the beaten path. And the ability to steer it back onto what you wanted to do matters a lot. And in the context of Devin, I think it's really interesting that you had those 4 tabs of, planning, and here's what we're going to do, and sort of check that off. And then the shell and the code, and then the browser, and showing where it's interacting with the world. And I think that's a really powerful paradigm. And so I'm a little bit curious about what was inspiration for that. Was it literally you thought of it as, hey, I'm peering over somebody's shoulder, or was it something else that really inspired that UI, which I think is starting to catch on in other areas now?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the nice things about the space, obviously, is that we get to build for ourselves in a way, and we're all obviously software engineers. And we ourselves use Devin all the time in our own work, even when we're building Devin, working through each of the pieces basically, and figuring out what it took from us to work well with Devin. As you kind of mentioned, I mean, if an agent is, you give it the task and then it goes off and does it, then it basically only has one try to do it all and to do everything perfectly. Whereas if you have a human intern or a junior engineer or whatever it is, if they're working on a project over the course of the day, and you have to check in 4 or 5 times and just give a quick 30 seconds of feedback on what's going on, for one, it helps them learn a lot, and for two, it means that they can still give you a lot of really valuable work over that time. And obviously it's much faster to be doing that than, to do all of those pieces yourself. I think we worked backwards from, what made sense and how we would want to interact with an AI coding teammate, and thought through technically how we would be able to get those pieces to work.
What is Devin today better and worse at than human software engineers? How does that change how you guys use it internally?
The encyclopedic knowledge is obviously really, really useful. I think, honestly, with DevOps and dev setup, I think there's a lot that it's very good at. I think DevOps is just kind of hard for humans. Actually, one of the first really exciting moments with Devin was we were trying to set up, get a database spinning, and get Kubernetes up, and whatever else, for our own purposes. And we were stuck after like an hour or something, and, going down the rabbit hole of debugging errors and stack traces and whatever. And we just asked Devin, hey, can you set this up, please? And then let us know how you did, because we can't do this right now. And Devin actually did. And that was one of the first like really exciting moments for us. I think the step-by-step flow of, editing and working with things, running commands live, looking at the errors that come up, all those pieces of, hey, like, do I have this port open, or like maybe I need to install this package or whatever, work very, very well in an agent workflow. So that's a big one. I think data analysis is another big one, which we've seen a lot as a good use case. Elad, you had a few use cases in that bucket actually in particular, but that's another very end-to-end flow, right? Often you're trying to find the right data sets from the internet, or pull out a CSV file, then you're sanitizing the data, then you're running whatever your exact analysis is, and then you're building a visualization of that analysis. And being able to just do that all from start to finish with an agent is another really good use case. I think as far as things that it's worse at, Devin is very much not the one who is going to be deciding what to do, if that makes sense. And so, we very much think of Devin as you provide the precise formulation of what you want built or what you want done. And Devin is the one that is doing the thoughtful execution of that, right? And so, you wouldn't be able to just go to Devin and say, hey, build me a great business or something, or build me, something like that. Because, I think a lot of Devin's focus is understanding how to take precise ideas and really formulate them into code and do that entire, testing process and debugging process and installing packages and deploying and whatever else that are involved with that.
What can you tell us about how it works, and what work happens in the foundation model layer and the system around it, and like how you guys invest in improvement?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't go too much into the details of how it works. I think it's it's obviously our one of the areas that we spend the most effort on. But I think a lot of it comes down to understanding the interface of the problem and understanding how exactly to optimize the problem that we're solving for, right? And I think one way that I frame it, for example, is, suppose you were given an issue, you were given a GitHub issue and you needed to solve it. Maybe there was some bug that you needed to fix, right? There certainly is a view where you could take the entirety of the code base and you could figure out from the bug exactly what the diff was that needed to be done, and write out that diff in clean text. And you could do that, right? And so, some perfect intelligence, either human or AI, in theory, would be able to do that, right? Because it would be able to figure out exactly what's going on and understand exactly what needs to be fixed, right? But I think practically for humans today, and we think also for AIs today, the cleaner path to do that involves, running the code yourself, right? Reproducing the bug, or, adding debugging statements and print statements and then rerunning the code, or taking a look at the logs, or, asking Stack Overflow, or all of these things, right? And a lot of the problem that we solve is figuring out how to, how to get Devin to think in that way and to make decisions in that way. So a lot of this planning and evaluation is what we spend our time on.
How do you think this all evolves over time? So for example, say we extrapolate out 1 or 2 years and then maybe 5 years, like what proportion of code do you think is written by agents like Devin, or what do you think changes in terms of how software engineers work in both the shorter term as well as longer term?
Yeah, so I think in the longer term, I think on the 5 to 10 year horizon, I think what we call software, changes a lot, and I think we think of Devin or the steps that we're building with Devin as kind of the next generation of human computer interfaces, right? Where, I think 10 years from now, people will look back and think, wow, isn't it crazy that, you had to learn all these esoteric languages and you had to, work through all these stack traces or whatever just to be able to communicate with your computer, right? At the end of the day, software engineering today is a discipline about being able to work with your computer and to have the computer do what you want it to do. I think that, what happens with software engineering is I think software engineers everywhere get to spend all their time on, the really fun part of the problem, which is taking any problem that you're given and figuring out exactly what the form of the solution should be, right? And so all of this work of, what are the cases and the edge cases and the details, what are all the flows, what are the architectures to build to solve each exact problem. And, taking it from that to that code implementation of exactly that, is something that the Devins of the world will solve, right? I think the really exciting thing is there's so much demand for software, right? And so, it's crazy to think about how, there are 30 million software engineers in the world, but, in aggregate, it's still only 0.4% of people, right? Giving those people the ability to do much more and also enabling so many other people to be able to work with software is something that we're really excited about. In the next 1 to 2 years, I think, I think obviously there's a lot of kind of broader changes that will happen. I do think software engineers, I think very quickly, who work with AIs and are kind of very AI native on this trend are going to be able to multiply themselves and do more. It's a really interesting time to be in AI. I think there's a lot of rising tides, and the hardware is getting better all the time. The foundation models are getting better all the time. Obviously, all of the agent work that we do is getting better and better all the time. And so, I think, I think things will move pretty quickly here.
What do you think are the things that will improve agents the most going forward? Is it the underlying foundation models? Is it reasoning, forms of memory, self-play, something else? I'm just sort of curious at a high level, even putting aside what Devin is doing, but like agents in general, like what is needed in the field to push these things forward?
Yeah, my honest answer is yes to all of the above. I think all of those things will be great. I think, even like inference speedups are going to be very useful for the end experience. I think, as you said, I think better reasoning, for example, in the base models is going to be really, really great. I think, figuring out some of this planning and, better tool use and so on. The way I'd kind of describe it is, I think agents today are a combination of all of these factors. And in some sense, I think there's a bit of a race between all of them where a perfect intelligence AI, in theory, wouldn't need anything else, right? You'd be able to just look at the code and tell you exactly what should change, right? At the same time, some perfect tool user, for example, perhaps might also be, a great solution. And I think what we'll see is, all of these are going to be a rising tide, and it'll be a matter of, which of these spaces see the most progress as far as how much impact they have on agents.
What do you think is going to be important from a human software engineer or just like human technology person 5 years from now? I realize that's a really long time scale in AI, but it's certainly not like encyclopedic knowledge anymore, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a meme that, the hottest new programming language is English, right? And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But with that said, I think that, the software engineering fundamentals are obviously still super, super valuable, right? People, for example, like I think, the internet today is something that we all kind of are able to use and kind of take for granted. But people who work with these networks, it's certainly very helpful for them to understand the details of TCP, right? And I think similarly, I think, I think we'll be able to communicate our ideas in English and work with all these things, but, understanding the internals of how computers work and understanding logic gates and, a lot of these core kind of pieces, like these core foundations, I think will still be very useful, right? And so, whether that's, algorithms or technologies or, logical reasoning or things like that, like I think I think the role of a software engineer 5 or 10 years from now looks something like a mix between a technical architect and a product manager today, where a lot of what you do is, you take problems that you're facing or that your business is facing or whatever, and you're really thinking about and breaking down what exactly the solution should be.
How do you think about it on an even farther time frame? Because if it was 5 years ago, I would have told either my kids or people who have kids, you should study computer science and math. 20 years from now, I'm not as certain. So I'm sort of curious how you think about the future of this field if much or all the work, including a lot of the planning, is actually done by machines at some point.
Yeah. I love that. So I have to say it's a worthwhile experience, even if it doesn't if it doesn't end up being practically useful. But no, I think a lot of these fundamentals will stay useful for a long time. There's obviously a lot of questions that come up about super intelligence and singularity and all of this. And it's very hard to predict. I think everyone in AI, it's, we've all made our own predictions and, tried to make our guesses, but I think it's hard to be very high confidence. But with that said, I do think that, we're going to see AI's concrete impacts on work and economy and people's lives, I think, a lot sooner than that. I think the way that we think about the problem is that, even with the tools that are available today and the technologies that exist today, there's so much that's possible to really impact people's lives, right? We're still very, very early in this whole AI revolution. I mean, even ChatGPT was about a year and a half ago at this point, and there's a lot more to do and a lot more to build, both on the research side and on the product side. So
that's the best guest I have. I had lunch, Scott, as you know, with one of your new hires today, and he's like, it just makes sense to me that like Scott Wu is going to be like the last human software engineer / labeler, right? And I'm like, all right, like without a better plan, I'm gonna have my kids like be the best labeler they can of that data.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I would guess that, I think good reasoning and good fundamentals and, good understanding of technology, are going to be useful for quite some time to come. I mean, maybe eventually there will be a point where, you just upload all this knowledge into your brain or whatever, and, you just become a perfect rational decision maker. And I'm sure that'll be a very exciting future. But I think, with what we have today, I imagine that, a lot of these logical fundamentals will stay relevant. Yeah.
Maybe on that note, I think one of the things that I really admire is just the a broad strength of the founding team and the early team at Cognition. Can you just talk a little bit about like your approach to hiring?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, I think I obviously think our team is really exceptional. I think I think a lot of the last 5 or 6 months has been really thinking about just the size of the problem that we're going after. And software is massive. It's a huge driver for change, and it's also a very deep and interesting problem. And a lot of our team today, in fact, I think almost everyone on our team today, I think was either a founder themselves before or were explicitly thinking of starting their own company, if not for Cognition. And I do think that working with people who are very high ownership, very interested to drive, and much more focused on outcomes than they are on politics or anything like that, is very important. On top of that, I of course think I think creativity, work ethic, good communication. I mean, all of these are super useful. I think we've thus far been mainly kind of going through a very close network of people that we've known well and worked well with, and kind of grown our team that way.
Are there specific types of people that you're looking to hire now?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for really great engineers and researchers. I think we're still very, very early, and it's a very big mission of what we want to do. And so I think, great technical thinkers who are excited to work on multiple different parts of the business. I think are what we're largely looking for. I think between customers and general strategy, research, engineering, and product, and all of this, it's we're kind of all doing everything, which is how it often is in an early startup. And so, I think we'd love to bring on more people that fit those archetypes.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Find us on Twitter at NoPriorsPod. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see our faces. Follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. That way you get a new episode every week. And sign up for emails or find transcripts for every episode at no-priors.com.